B train, delayed. Estimated wait, 23 minutes.
23 minutes. If you hear the words Andromeda Terminal, run. Don't ask questions. Just run.
Next stop, Andromeda Terminal.
You seem confused, Mr. Lockwood. It's a transition. Let me help you make it.
It's not a choice. It's a trap.
The delay announcement felt like a personal affront. Not the words themselves, not the robotic, disembodied voice of the MTA, incapable of inflection, let alone malice. It was the fact of it. 23 minutes. An eternity when measured against the meticulous, unwavering schedule I had cultivated for my life. 23 minutes stolen from the 117 I had allocated for the evening's archival review. 23 minutes disrupting the delicate equilibrium I maintained between the sprawling, chaotic city outside and the ordered, predictable sanctuary within the library walls. I exhaled sharply, already recalculating, reorganizing, adjusting in real time, compensating for the lost minutes. The effect rippled outward, an unseen disturbance fracturing the smooth surface of my evening. The time lost in transit would need to be made up elsewhere. Perhaps I could abbreviate my chamomile ritual, skip the measured steeping, accept an approximation instead of precision, or trim my review of the manuscript collection, prioritize the early 19th century correspondences, postpone the map analysis. But why should I have to compromise? The thought coiled tightly within me. There had been no warning, no gradual buildup of disruptions, just the cold, indifferent voice declaring my schedule irrelevant. The delay was nothing to the system, to the city, to the countless other commuters who might sigh, check their phones, and adjust accordingly. But to me it was an intrusion, an unwelcome hand reaching into the well-ordered structure of my life, carelessly shifting the pieces. I tightened my grip on the worn leather strap of my briefcase, inhaling deeply, forcing the irritation to settle. This was not the first delay I had endured, nor would it be the last. I filed it away in the growing mental archive of urban inefficiencies, right alongside the malfunctioning traffic light on 38th Street and the pothole on 5th Avenue that had gone unaddressed for weeks. Data points, patterns, small cracks in the city's machinery, harbingers of decay in a system that relied on precision, yet delivered chaos. My eyes drifted across the platform. 42nd Street, Bryant Park. A stone's throw from the Schwartzman building, my sanctuary. Even from here, I could picture the grand reading room, the rows upon rows of meticulously organized books, manuscripts, and maps. The weight of history bound in leather and ink, categorized and indexed, comprehensible in a way the city's restless, ever-shifting nature never could be. Yet tonight the platform felt wrong. It was unusually deserted for this hour. Typically, even late evenings saw a steady flow of commuters, tourists still clutching their shopping bags, professionals returning from late shifts, the city's nocturnal denizens drifting through the tunnels. But now there were only a handful of figures scattered along the platform, their faces obscured by the harsh fluorescent lighting. At the far end, someone caught my attention. Tall, thin, skeletal. He stood motionless near the edge of the platform, dressed in what appeared to be an old-fashioned conductor's uniform, complete with a peaked cap, the kind I had only seen in archival photographs. An eccentric, certainly, but hardly out of place in a city of infinite peculiarities. This was New York. One could sit across from a man in a three-piece suit, reading the New York Times, and beside another in a tattered robe arguing with a street lamp. I dismissed him as an oddity, a fleeting detail, and returned my attention to the delay, my irritation simmering. I reached into my briefcase, unfastening the worn clasps, and retrieved my pocket watch. A habit, a compulsion perhaps, but there was comfort in it, a tangible measure of fleeting moments, a reinforcement of order in a world prone to disruption. The watch, a gift from my grandfather, was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, a silver hunter case engraved with intricate patterns. The hands moved with smooth, silent precision, the way the city was supposed to move, the way my life was supposed to move. Uninterrupted. 9:57 p.m. The delay was now 24 minutes. A small, rational voice in my mind reminded me that this was still trivial in the grand scheme of things. But another voice, more primal, resented every second stolen. Time was not an abstract resource to be wasted. It was something to be accounted for, measured, understood. The rumble of the approaching train should have pulled me from my thoughts, but instead, it sent an odd shiver through me. It was wrong. Not the usual ear-splitting screech of steel grinding against steel. No, the sound was muted, distant, as if the train were approaching from some far-off place rather than the next station. And yet, when it arrived, it looked exactly as it should. The same R160 model I had boarded 100 times before. The same dull metal exterior, the same MTA insignia. I exhaled, shaking off the momentary unease. The delay had rattled me, that was all. I stepped inside. The train doors slid shut with their usual mechanical finality, sealing me inside. The car was nearly empty, only a handful of passengers scattered throughout, each absorbed in their own world. I took my usual seat near the middle, pressing my back against the rigid plastic, exhaling sharply as I tried to shake off the residual frustration from the delay. 24 minutes late. It would take precise recalibration to recover the evening. The train shuddered as it lurched forward, moving smoothly at first. I glanced around, cataloging my surroundings with the unconscious habit of an archivist, categorizing details without effort. Across from me, an older man sat with a newspaper, its pages brittle and yellowed at the edges. The print was faded, not just worn, but strangely outdated, as though it had been left in the sun for decades. His posture was rigid, his face obscured behind the text. To his right, a businessman was hunched over his tablet, the blue glow of the screen reflecting off his glasses. He was completely still, unnaturally so, his fingers poised above the screen as if caught in a moment of indecision. Further down, a young man in athletic wear fidgeted, his leg bouncing rapidly. His fingers drummed against his knee, erratic, restless. His eyes darted toward the doors, then back toward the floor, as if he were anticipating something, or dreading it. At the far end of the car, the conductor stood in his outdated uniform, his peaked cap casting a shadow over his face. He had not moved since I first saw him on the platform. Something about this arrangement unsettled me. The train was late, and yet everything felt too still. I reached for my pocket watch, letting the smooth silver case ground me. 10:03 p.m. We were already behind schedule. I exhaled and adjusted my briefcase on my lap, the familiar weight of its leather strap comforting against my palm. My fingers brushed against my wallet, and as I pulled it free, something else slipped out with it. A small, folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges from years of being tucked away. My breath caught in my throat. Nathaniel's note. A relic I had carried for years, more out of habit than belief. A reminder of a relationship fractured beyond repair. My fingers trembled slightly as I unfolded it, the paper creased and delicate from countless readings, each word scrawled in my brother's erratic handwriting. Andromeda Terminal. Below it, underlined multiple times, a frantic warning. If you ever hear the words Andromeda Terminal, run. Don't ask why. Don't wait. Just get off the train. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head, the old irritation resurfacing. Nathaniel had always been the unstable one. Brilliant, yes. His mind was capable of grasping theories and concepts far beyond the limits of most people. But he had wandered too far into the theoretical, too deep into his obsessions. I remembered the way he spoke of the city's underground, the labyrinth beneath the streets that no map could fully capture, intersections where reality blurred, where tunnels led to places that should not exist. He was a physicist by trade, but his ideas had drifted into madness, ramblings about multi-dimensional pathways, about places hidden beneath the surface of our understanding. I had dismissed him. We had not spoken in years. I had long since convinced myself that his warning was the product of a mind unraveling, a man so obsessed with invisible structures that he had lost his grip on the visible world. And yet, why had I kept the note? I ran my thumb over the ink, tracing the words, old frustration mixing with something colder, something uneasy. It was nonsense. It had to be. I refolded the note and tucked it back into my wallet, a relic of a relationship long past, a whisper of paranoia that did not belong to me. I turned my attention back to my watch. 10:04 p.m. The train was still moving, but something felt wrong. The rhythm of the movement had changed, the usual sequence of motion, the acceleration, the brief, weightless pause before the gentle deceleration into the next station was missing. The train was still gathering speed. I sat up straighter, my grip tightening on my briefcase. We should have stopped by now. The lights overhead flickered just for a moment, a small thing, barely perceptible, but it sent a thread of unease crawling up my spine. I turned to the businessman. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice measured. "This isn't an express train, is it?" He glanced up, his face utterly blank. "Express?" he repeated, as if I had spoken a word with no meaning. His eyes flickered back to his screen, dismissing me without another thought. cold knot tightened in my stomach. I turned toward the young man in athletic wear. His fingers were still tapping against his knee, but his eyes were darting toward the doors, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He sensed it too. I swallowed. "Excuse me, do you know if we—" His head jerked toward me, his face pale and damp with sweat. His lips moved, forming words I could barely hear. Before. His voice glitched, looping over itself, a broken record of fear. A strange, suffocating silence fell over the train. I turned to the windows, expecting the usual blur of passing stations, graffiti-marked walls, advertisements peeling at the edges. Instead, I saw nothing. Not darkness, not tunnel walls, just a void, stretched and distorted, streaked with impossible lines of light. The city was gone. My breath caught in my throat. I turned toward the conductor's booth, heart hammering, needing an answer, an explanation. And then the announcement came, the same robotic, indifferent voice. "Next stop, Andromeda Terminal." The note burned in my pocket. Nathaniel's frantic warning, his final warning, rushed back in a sickening wave. "Run. Don't ask why. Don't wait. Just get off the train." My pulse pounded in my ears, my vision narrowing as I looked at the conductor at the end of the car. He was watching me now. His expression had not changed, but beneath the brim of his cap I could see them. His eyes. They had no pupils. I stood, my breath shallow, my body screaming for movement, for escape. But the doors were sealed. The train was still accelerating. The city was gone, and I was trapped inside. I lunged for the emergency brake. The instinct was immediate, desperate, overriding reason. My fingers curled around the metal lever and pulled, but it didn't move. It was sealed, locked in place as if it had never been meant to function in the first place. A pulse of cold panic spread through my chest. I turned back toward the windows, hoping for some glimpse of New York, of the tunnels, of anything recognizable. But there was nothing. The world outside the train had unraveled. Where the city should have been, there was only an endless void, a vast expanse, not of darkness, but of something deeper, something impossible. Light streaked across it in twisting, impossible geometries, shifting and realigning as if the fabric of reality itself had fractured. The usual sense of movement, of rushing forward, of passing through tunnels and station platforms, had been replaced by something else entirely. The train wasn't moving through space. It was falling, plunging through something I couldn't comprehend. I forced myself to breathe, to focus, to analyze, think, categorize, understand. The passengers remained seated, undisturbed, as if nothing was wrong. The businessman continued tapping at his tablet, his face illuminated in a wash of cold blue light. The old man with the newspaper turned another page, indifferent to the impossible scene outside. Even the fidgeting man, the only one who had shown any signs of unease before, now sat still, his eyes vacant. The conductor stood at the far end of the car, watching. His face was blank, but his pupilless blue eyes remained locked on me. A metallic taste filled my mouth. I turned back to the nervous young man, the only one who had reacted when the train deviated from its course. He was shaking now, his body rigid, his lips moving rapidly in a silent, frantic mantra. His voice was stuck in a loop, glitching, stuttering over the same broken phrase. Before. Then, silence. His body flickered, distorting as if he were an image on a failing screen. His form twisted for a fraction of a second, stretched and pulled out of sync with the rest of the train, as though he were existing in two places at once, one here, one somewhere else. I took a step back, my mind racing through every logical explanation, searching for something, anything, to ground myself. Nathaniel's note: if you ever hear the words Andromeda Terminal, run. I reached into my pocket, feeling the paper's creased edge against my fingertips. I hadn't believed him. I had dismissed his warnings as the paranoia of a man who had drifted too far from reality. But this was not a hallucination. The train's interior dimmed, the fluorescent lights above flickering in slow, rhythmic pulses. The overhead announcement repeated itself, static, distorting the words. Next stop, Andromeda Terminal. I stumbled toward the conductor's booth, my feet unsteady as the train shuddered beneath me. The pocket watch. I had seen it earlier, resting on a small metal shelf near the conductor's seat. But it was wrong. Not a normal timepiece, not something meant to measure seconds and minutes. I spotted it again. Its silver casing gleamed under the dim lights, the engravings intricate, shifting subtly as if they were alive. I reached for it, hand trembling. The face of the watch was not a clock, but a series of concentric circles, filled with symbols that pulsed and shifted, as if responding to the train's movement. And the hands, they weren't moving forward. They were moving backward. A sharp lurch threw me off balance. The train accelerated, no longer moving at speeds within human comprehension. I slammed against the wall of the car, gripping the handrail to steady myself. The floor vibrated beneath me, the air growing thick, pressing against my chest as though gravity itself was shifting. I forced my gaze up. The conductor was now right in front of me. His sudden presence sent a bolt of ice through my veins. I hadn't heard him move. I hadn't seen him take a single step. He had simply appeared. His blue eyes, devoid of pupils, locked onto mine. Looking for something, Mr. Lockwood. My name. His voice was calm, perfectly measured, as if this were any other commute, any other evening. "What is this place?" I stammered, still gripping the watch, my breath shallow. "Where are we going?" The conductor's lips curled slightly. Not a smile exactly, but the suggestion of one. "The Andromeda Terminal." I swallowed hard. "That doesn't exist." "On the contrary," he said, tilting his head slightly. "You are already en route." My heart pounded against my ribs. I turned the watch over in my hands, watching as the symbols rearranged themselves, the hands continuing to move backward. "The train," I said slowly, my voice unsteady. "It's not traveling through space, is it?" The conductor's gaze darkened. "You are perceptive, Mr. Lockwood," he said, his tone almost amused. "But perception is only as useful as one's ability to accept the truth." "What truth?" The conductor exhaled softly, as though disappointed by the question. "That distance," he said, gesturing toward the impossible void outside, "is a matter of perspective and time." His fingers reached toward the watch, plucking it effortlessly from my grasp. is not as linear as you once believed. I tried to move, to grab it back, but my body felt heavy, my limbs sluggish. The conductor tucked the watch into his pocket. "I would advise you to remain seated," he said. "The transition can be unsettling." The train shuddered violently. The lights flickered out. For the first time since stepping onto this train, I felt something deeper than unease. I felt terror. Because in that moment of darkness, in the brief instant before the emergency lights flickered back to life, I saw them. Silhouettes, figures, standing in the aisles, pressed against the walls, packed into every corner of the train. Dozens, hundreds. Passengers who had not been there before, and their eyes, they were all staring at me. The lights flickered back on, cold and artificial, chasing away the brief moment of complete darkness. But the afterimage of what I had seen, the passengers that shouldn't have been there, the countless pairs of unblinking eyes watching me, remained burned into my mind. My breath came in shallow gasps, my fingers still tingling from where I had gripped the conductor's watch only seconds ago. But it was gone now, taken from me, tucked neatly into the conductor's pocket, as if it had never been mine to hold. I turned in slow, measured movements, afraid of what I might see. But the seats were empty again. The passengers, the unnatural crowd that had filled every inch of the train, had vanished. Only the ones I had seen before remained. The businessman still stared at his tablet, his fingers unmoving. The old man held his newspaper open to the same page. The nervous young man sat hunched over, his mouth slightly open, his body vibrating with the tension of something unspeakable. And at the far end of the car, Gabriel was standing. He had not been there before. His smile was calm, his suit perfectly pressed, his posture unnervingly relaxed. He met my gaze with the familiarity of an old friend, though I had never seen him before in my life. "Mr. Lockwood," he said, his voice like velvet, smooth and practiced. "You seem troubled." I couldn't answer. I looked to the conductor, expecting him to intervene, but he only watched, his expression unreadable. Gabriel stepped forward, closing the distance between us with slow, deliberate movements. The air around him felt wrong, like it bent around him, like he was somehow more real than anything else in this train. "I understand," he continued, his tone dipped in gentle reassurance. "This is a significant transition. Few are prepared for it, but that's why I'm here, to help you adjust." I swallowed, the dryness in my throat making it difficult to speak. "Adjust to what?" Gabriel tilted his head, amused. "To your next step, to the invitation." I took a step back. "What invitation?" "The one extended to all who reach the Andromeda Terminal." The words hit me like a stone dropped into deep water. Andromeda Terminal. The place Nathaniel had warned me about. The place that wasn't supposed to exist. "That's not a destination," I said, shaking my head. It's something else." Gabriel's smile did not falter. "That depends on your perspective." I turned to the conductor again, desperate for some confirmation, some denial, something to anchor me in logic. But he only watched, silent. Gabriel took another step forward. "Imagine, Mr. Lockwood, a place unbound by time, A place where knowledge is not limited by pages in books, where understanding is not confined to the rigid structures of linear existence. Imagine the ability to step beyond the constraints of this world and into something greater. His voice was intoxicating. His words spun images in my mind, vast archives of knowledge, entire realities unfolding like pages in an infinite book, each one offering a glimpse of something beyond human comprehension. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. Gabriel extended his hand. "You could see it," he whispered. "You could understand." For a moment, I hesitated. For a moment, I almost reached for him. Because wasn't that what I had always wanted? Understanding? A world of perfect order, where nothing was lost, where knowledge wasn't locked away behind bureaucracy and time, where every question had an answer. But then I remembered Nathaniel. I remembered the fear in his writing, the urgency of his warning, and I saw, truly saw, the man before me, his perfect suit, his perfect voice, his perfect smile, too perfect, not human. I saw the passengers, the businessman, the old man, the nervous young man, all of them trapped, stuck in some endless loop, expressions frozen in place, unmoving, as if they had been here forever. I saw the conductor watching silently, a facilitator, not a guide, not a guardian, but something else. And I understood. This was not an invitation, this was a trap. I took a step back. "No." Gabriel blinked. "No?" I straightened. My hands curled into fists, not in defiance, but in certainty. "I choose to go home." A flicker of something passed over Gabriel's face. Disappointment. The conductor, for the first time, looked intrigued. Gabriel sighed, smoothing his jacket, as if composing himself. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lockwood," he said, "but your home is already far behind you." The words sent a cold shiver through me. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if I was already too far gone? What if the city was just a memory, just something I had imagined? What if... No. I refused to believe that. I reached into my pocket, feeling for something, anything, that could ground me. My fingers brushed against worn leather. My wallet. Nathaniel's note. I clutched it tightly. I had ignored my brother once. I wouldn't do it again. I let go. Not physically. There was nothing to fight. But mentally, emotionally, I let go of the trap, of the carefully constructed illusions they wanted me to accept, of the lure of infinite knowledge. I didn't embrace the void. I didn't accept Gabriel's offer. I simply chose not to believe it. And then, the world shifted. Gabriel's smile cracked. The train flickered, the passengers vanishing like mist, the walls of the car becoming transparent, the universe beyond them warping, coming undone. The conductor took a step forward, his expression no longer neutral but startled. "What have you done?" he whispered. The train shattered, and I was standing on the platform, 42nd Street, Bryant Park. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly. The tiled walls were smeared with their usual grime. The distant rumble of an approaching train vibrated through the station. I looked up at the arrivals board. The B train, delayed, 23 minutes. The announcement crackled overhead. I felt a shudder run through me, not of fear, but of something deeper. Recognition, understanding. I reached into my pocket. My fingers closed around the note. I didn't need to open it. I knew what it said. I turned away from the platform, from the arriving train, from the life I had so meticulously structured. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I would do. But I knew one thing. I would never look at the world the same way again. The ride was over, but I carried it with me, and that was something I could never unlearn.